Hey everybody, what's going on? Today's a new day. Today is January the 5th. It's 2 o'clock. So I am going to get started. So a couple updates. Yesterday I broke my glasses. So I had to put tape on my glasses because this side right here broke off. So I have a piece of black tape right here. So if that is bothering you, that my glasses are like to the side, that explains. So I just wanted to let y'all know that heads up. So as you know, I'm reading this book. It's Alice's Adventure in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. So I am on chapter 11. So I'm actually in the book now. I know the last video I made, I was just finishing up with the introduction. So I'm all done with the introduction. And so now I'm actually starting with the story. And so I am on chapter 11, and it's titled The Pool of Tears. So the picture there, right here on my right. So you can see that Alice, that's actually Alice. Her neck is like really long. So she basically ended up drinking a bottle of some formula of something that was in a bottle. And she thought it would make her grow back to her normal size because she ended up shrinking. Because she ended up, what did she do? Oh my gosh, I might have to go back. So let me go back really quick. So she did something. All right, so here's Alice right here. You can see her. This is where she's getting ready to take a drink. It says drink me. And so she thought that if she were to drink it, that she would go back to normal size. And she tried to see like if it would make her poison or not. And what ended up happening is she ended up getting like a long neck, and it just kept growing taller and taller. But before then, she ended up going down the rabbit hole. She found the rabbit, chased the rabbit, went down the rabbit hole. It took her a long time to fall, and she ended up in this deep thought about her cat. Who's going to feed my cat, and who's going to do this and that, and what's going to happen to me, and am I in New Zealand, or how far from the latitude am I? Like, where am I falling to? So she's like thinking about this great fall. And then like she sees this key on the table. And so she used the key to like get inside of this door. There's like a little small door, but it's too small for Alice. So she uses the key. You can see she's actually holding the key in her hand. And so she uses this key, and it actually works. And she's able to like to open the door, and she's able to see to the other side, but she's too small to even fit her head and her shoulders in there. So she ended up, what did she do? Let's see. So there's a little door. So at the back of the table, so half hoping that she might find another key. Okay, so find another key. So there's a golden key in a lock, and to her delight, it fitted. So Alice opens the door and found it led into a small passage, so not much larger than a rat hole. So she knelt down and she looked along the passage into the loveliest garden you ever saw. So there's the garden on the other side. She says how she longed to get out of the dark hall. So right now she's in this dark hall and she wants to get out. And so she sees the other side. It's a lovely garden, but it's too small of a rat hole. So then it says, and wandered about among those beds of bright flowers and the cool fountains, but she could not even get her head through the doorway. And even if her head would go through the doorway, thought poor Alice, it would be very little use without my shoulders. So, I mean, even if she could get her head in, it would be useless without being able to get her shoulders through the door as well. So, oh, how I wish I could shut up like a telescope. Ha ha ha. And then she says, I think I could if only I knew how to begin. For you see, so many out of the way things happen had happened lately, and Alice began to think that very few things indeed were really impossible. So she, at this point, was believing like that anything's possible with everything strange that's been happening. So there seemed to be no use of waiting by the little door. So she went back to the table. That's where she found the key. So she goes back to the table, half hoping she might find another key. Or at any rate, a book of rules for shutting people up like telescopes. So this time she found a little bottle. So this is the bottle that she found, the one I was showing you, which she drank. She ended up drinking it. And then she ended up getting like, let's see, drink me. So beautifully printed in large letters. So if it were all well to say, drink me, but the wise little Alice was not going to do that in a hurry. So no, I'll look first, she said, and see whether it's marked poison or not. And for she had read several nice little stories about children who had got burnt and eaten up by wild beasts and other unpleasant things, all because they would not remember the simple rules their friend had taught them, or their friends had taught them. So such as that a red hot poker would burn you if you hold it too long, or that if you cut your finger very deeply with a knife, it usually bleeds. And she had never forgotten that. So if you drink much from a bottle marked poison, it is almost certain to disagree with you sooner or later. So, however, this bottle was not marked poison. And so Alice ventured to taste it and finding it very nice. In fact, it had, in fact, a sort of mixed flavor of cherry tart, custard, pineapple, roast turkey, toffee, and hot buttered toast. And so she very soon finished it off. So she ended up drinking all of it. And then she said, what a curious feeling. So I must be shutting up like a telescope. So it was indeed. And so now only 10 inches high, and her face brightened up at the thought that she was now the right size for going through the little door into the lovely garden. First, however, she waited for a few minutes to see if she was going to shrink any further. Okay, so she felt a little nervous about this, for it might end, said Alice to herself. In my going out together like a candle, I wondered, what should I be like then? And she tried to fancy what the flame of the candle looks like after the candle's blown out, for she could not remember even having seen such a thing. So after a while, finding that nothing more happened, she decided on going into the garden at once. But alas, poor Alice, when she got to the door, she found she had forgotten the little golden key, and she went back to the table for it. She found she could not possibly reach it. Okay, so what happened is Alice is small. She's small enough now to go through the door after taking the poison, but now she can't reach to get the key, and she needs the key. So it says when she got to the door, she found she had forgotten the little golden key, and when she went back to the table for it, she found she could not possibly reach it. She could see it quite plainly through the glass, and she tried her best to climb up one leg of the table, but it was too slippery. And when she tired herself out with trying, the poor little thing sat down crying. So now she's crying, and she needs this key, and she's not able to get this key. And so she's left here. There's nobody around. And so soon her eyes fell on a little glass box that was lying under the table. And then she opened it. And she found a very small cake. And so on the words, it said, "Eat me." So it was beautifully marked in curtains. I'll eat it, said Alice. So Alice ended up eating this cake. And then when she ate the cake, that's when she got the long neck. So she ate cake and she got the long neck. So the bottle that had poison, sorry, it didn't have poison, but the bottle that she drank, it made her small. And it made her small enough to fit through the door. But like, so again, this picture, that's what she's getting ready to drink. It makes her small enough to get through that little door. Here's the door right here. So this is the door. You can see the door first. And then the next page, you can see her with the bottle that she's getting ready to drink. And then she drinks it, and then it makes her small. So now she's small enough to get through the door, but now she can't get to the key. And then she sees cake, and then she ends up eating the cake. And then it gives her this really long neck. Okay, so this is the pools of tears. So this is where I'm going to start my reading now. All right, so the pools of tears. Carouser, carouser, cried Alice. She was so much surprised. For that moment, she quite forgot how to speak good English. Now, I'm going out like the largest telescope that ever was. Goodbye, feet. For when she looked down at her feet, they seemed to be almost out of sight. They were all getting so far off. Oh, my poorest little feet. Oh, my poor little feet. I wonder who will put on your shoes and stockings for you now, dears. I'm sure I shouldn't be able. I shall be a great deal too far off to trouble myself about you. You must manage the best way you can. So Alice is talking to her feet, and she can't see her feet, and so she's like, oh my goodness, like I can't care for you any longer. Like I can't even see you. Like who's going to care for you now? And so it says, I'm sure I shouldn't be able. So she's not really able to talk. So she says shouldn't, SHA''N''T. So I shall be a great deal far off to trouble myself about you. You must manage the best way you can, but I must be kind to them, thought Alice, or perhaps they won't walk the way I want to go. Let me see. I'll give them a new pair of boots every Christmas. And she went on planning to herself how she would manage it. They must go by the carrier, she thought. And how funny it'll seem, sending presents to one's own feet, and how odd the directions will look. Alice's right foot, hearthrug near the fender with Alice's love. Oh dear, what nonsense I'm making. Just at this moment, her head struck against the roof of the hall. In fact, she was now rather more than 9 feet high, and she at once took up the little golden key and hurried off to the garden door. Poor Alice! It was as much as she could do, lying down on her side, to look through into the garden with one eye. But to get through was more hopeless than ever. She sat down and began to cry again. You ought to be ashamed of yourself, said Alice. A girl like you, she might well say this, to go on crying in this way. Stop this moment, I tell you. But she went on all the same, shedding gallons of tears until there was a large pool all around her, about 4 inches deep and reaching half down the hall. So Alice is talking to herself. So she kind of like coaches herself through things, like stop crying. You can do this. Think again. Like she talks to herself and coaches herself. So she's by herself still. She's trying to figure this all out. So after a time, she heard a little pattering on of feet in a distance. Okay, so now it sounds like someone else is coming now. So a pattering of feet in the distance, and she hastily dried her eyes to see what was coming. It was a white rabbit returning splendidly, dressed with a pair of white kid gloves in one hand and a large fan in the other. He come trotting along in a great hurry, muttering to himself as he said, "Oh, the Duchess! Oh, Duchess! Oh, won't she be savage if I keep her waiting?" Alice felt so desperate that she was ready to ask of anyone. So when the rabbit came near her, she began in a low, timid voice, "If you please, sir." The rabbit started violently, dropped the white kid gloves and the fan, and scurried away into the darkness as hard as he could go. So it sounds like the rabbit kind of took off and like left her and like so Alice took up the fan and gloves, and as the hall was very hot, she kept fanning herself all the time. She went on talking. "Dear, dear, how," kept fanning, "dear, dear, how queer everything is today. And yesterday things went on just as usual. I wonder if I've been changed in the night. Let me think. Was I the same when I got up this morning? I almost think I can remember feeling a little different. But if I'm not the same, the next question is, who in the world am I? That's a great puzzle. And she began thinking over all the children she knew that were of the same age as herself to see if she could have been changed for any of them. "I'm sure I'm not Ada," she said, "for her hair goes in such long ringlets, and mine doesn't go in ringlets at all. And I'm sure I can't be Mabel, for I know all sorts of things, and she knows such very little. Besides, she's she and I'm I, and oh dear, how puzzling it is. I'll try if I know all the things I used to know. Let me see. 4 times 5 is 12, and 4 times 6 is 13, and 4 times 7 is, oh dear, I shall never get to 20 at that rate. However, the multiplication table doesn't signify. Let's try geography. London is the capital of Paris, and Paris is the capital of Rome, and Rome, no, that's all wrong. I'm certain I must have changed for Mabel. I'll try and say, "How doth the little," and she crossed her hands on her lap as if she were saying lessons and began to repeat it, but her voice sounded hoarse and strange, and the words did not come the same as they used to do. "How doth the little crocodile improve his shining tail and pour the waters of the Nile on every golden scale? How cheerfully he seems to grin, how neatly spreads his claws and welcomes little fishes in with gently smiling jaws." "I'm sure those are not the right words," said poor Alice, and her eyes filled with tears again as she went on. "I must be Mabel after all, and I shall have to go and live in the poky little house and have next to no toys to play with, and oh dear, ever so many lessons to learn. No, I've must made up my mind about it. If I'm Mabel, I'll stay down here. It'll be no use they're putting their hands down and saying, 'Come up again.' Dear, I shall only look up and say, 'Who am I then? Tell me the first, and then, if I like being that person, I'll come up. If not, I'll stay down here till I'm somebody else.' But oh dear," cried Alice, with a sudden burst of tears, "I do wish they would put their heads down. I am so very tired of being all alone here." So she's just confirmed that she's alone. Um, so as she said this, she looked down at her hands and was surprised to see that she had put on one of the rabbit's little white gloves while she was talking. "How can I have done that?" she thought. "I must be growing small again." So she got up and went to the table to measure herself by it. and found that, as nearly as she could guess, she was now about 2 feet high and was going on shrinking rapidly. She soon found out that the cause of this was the fan she was holding, and she dropped it hastily, just in time to save herself from shrinking away altogether. That was a narrow escape, and said Alice, a good deal frightened at the sudden change, but very glad to find herself still in existence. And now for the garden. And she ran with all speed back to the little door. But alas, the little door was shut again, and the golden key was lying on the glass table as before. And things are worse than ever, thought the poor child. For I never was so small as this before, never. And I declare it's too bad that it is. And she said these words for foot slipper for her foot slipped, and in another moment, splash! She was up to her chin in salt water. Her first idea was that she had somehow fallen into the sea. And in that case, I can go back by railway, she said to herself. Alice had been to the seaside once in her life and had come to the general conclusion that whenever you go to on the English coast, you find a number of bathing machines in the sea, some children digging in the sand with wooden spades, then a row of lodging houses, and behind them a railway station. However, she soon made out that she was in a pool of tears. Oh my goodness, which she had wept when she was 9 feet high. I wish I hadn't cried so much, said Alice, and she swam about trying to find her way out. I shall be punished for it now, I suppose, by being drowned in my own tears. That will be a queer thing, to be sure. However, everything is queer today. So Alice is in her tears, her pool of tears that she cried. So she's very small now. She's shrunk from holding the fan. So just then she heard something splashing about in the pool a little way off, and she swam near to make out what it was. At first she thought it must be a walrus or hippopotamus, but then she remembered how small she was now, and she soon made out that it was only a mouse that had slipped in like herself. Would it be of any use now, thought Alice, to speak to this mouse? Everything is so out of the way down here that I should think very likely it can talk. At any rate, there's no harm in trying. So she began, Oh, mouse, do you know the way out of this pool? I am swimming about. Oh, mouse. Alice thought this must be the right way of speaking to a mouse. She had never done such a thing before, but she remembered having seen in her brother's Latin grammar a mouse of a mouse to a mouse, oh mouse. The mouse looked at her rather inquisitively and seemed to her to wink with one of his little eyes, but it said nothing. Perhaps it doesn't understand English, thought Alice. I dare say it's a French mouse, come over with William the Conqueror. For with all her knowledge of history, Alice had no very clear notion how long ago anything had happened. So she began again. Aueste machate, which was the first sentence in her French lesson book. The mouse gave a sudden leap out of the water and seemed to quiver all over with fright. Oh, I beg your pardon, cried Alice hastily, After that, she had hurt the poor animal's feelings. I quite forgot you didn't like cats. Not like cats, cried the mouse in a shrill, passionate voice. Would you like cats if you were me? Well, perhaps not, said Alice in a soothing tone. Don't be angry about it. And yet I wish I could show you your own cat, Denia. I think you'd take a fancy to cats. If you could only see her. She is such a dear, quiet thing, Alice went on, half to yourself, as she swam lazily about in the pool. And she sits purring so nicely by the fire, licking her paws and washing her face. And she is a nice, soft thing to nurse. And she's such a capital one for catching mice. Oh, I beg your pardon, cried Alice again, for this time the mouse was bristling all over, and she felt certain it was it must be really offended. Who wouldn't talk about her anymore if you'd rather not? We won't talk about her anymore if you'd rather not. We indeed, cried the mouse, who was trembling down to the end of its tail, as if I would talk on such a subject. Our family always hated cats. Nasty, low, vulgar things. Don't let me hear that name again. I wouldn't indeed, said Alice in a great hurry to change the subject of conversation. Are you fond of dogs? The mouse did not answer, so Alice went on eagerly. There is such a nice little dog near our house. I should like to show you. A little bright-eyed terrier, you know, with, oh, such long curly brown hair. And it'll fetch you things when you throw them. And it'll sit up and beg for its dinner and all sorts of things. I can't remember half of them. And it belongs to a farmer, you know, and he says it's so useful, it's worth £100. He says it kills all the rats. And oh dear, cried Alice in a sorrowful tone, I'm afraid I offended it again, for the mouse was swimming away from her as hard as he could and making quite a commotion in the pool as it went. So here's a picture. If you care to see an image, there's the mouse swimming away from Alice in the pool of tears. So she called softly after it, Dear mouse, come back again, and we won't talk about cats or dogs either, if you don't like them. When the mouse heard this, it turned around and swam slowly back to her. Its face was quite pale with passion, thought Alice, and it said in a low, trembling voice, Let us get to the shore, and then I'll tell you my history, and you'll understand why it is I hate cats and dogs. It was high time to go, for the pool was getting quite crowded with the birds and animals that had fallen into it. There was a duck and a dodo, a lory and an eaglet, and several other curious creatures. Alice led the way, and the whole party swam to the shore. So here's the next page, and there's a picture of the different animals that were in the pool of tears. They're now on shore. So then the next chapter, this one's a caucus race and a long tail. So there were indeed a queer-looking party that assembled on the bank, the birds with draggled feathers, the animals with their fur clinging close to them, and all dripping wet, cross, and uncomfortable. The first question, of course, was how to get dry again. They had a consultation about this, and after a few minutes, it seemed quite natural to Alice to find herself talking familiarly with them, as if she had known them all her life. Indeed, she had quite a long argument with the lorry, and who at last turned sulky and would only say, "I'm older than you, and you must know better." And this Alice would not allow without knowing how old it was. And as the lorry positively refused to tell its age, there was no more to be said. At last, the mouse, who seemed to be a person of some authority among them, called out, "Sit down, all of you. Listen to me. I'll soon make you dry enough." They all sat down at once in a large ring, with the mouse in the middle. Alice kept her eyes anxiously fixed on it, for she felt sure she would catch a bad cold if she did not get dry very soon. "Ahem," said the mouse with an important air. "Are you all ready? This is the driest thing I know. Silence all around, if you please." William the Conqueror, whose cause was favored by the Pope, was soon submitted to by the English, who wanted leaders and had been of late much accustomed to usurpation and conquest. Edwin and Morcar, the Pearl of Mercia and Northumbria. "Ah," said Laurie with a shiver. "I beg your pardon," said the mouse, frowning, but very politely. "Did you speak?" "Not I," said Laurie hastily. "I thought you did," said the mouse. I proceeded. "Edwin and Morcar, the Earls of Mercia and Northumbria, declared for him, and even Stigand, and patriotic Archbishop of Canterbury, found it advisable." "Found what?" said the duck. "Found it," the mouse replied rather crossly. "Of course you know what it means." "I know what it means well enough. When I find a thing," said the duck, "it's generally a frog or a worm. The question is, what did the Archbishop find?" The mouse did not notice the question, but hurriedly went on. "Found it advisable to go with Edgar Atheling to meet William and offer him the crown. William's conduct at first was moderate, but the insolence of his Normans. How are you getting on now, my dear?" it continued, turning to Alice as it spoke. As she went, "As wet as ever," said Alice in a melancholy tone. "It doesn't seem to dry me at all." "In that case," said the dodo solemnly, rising to its feet, "I move that the meeting adjourn for the immediate adoption of more energetic remedies." "Speak English," said the eaglet. "I don't know the meaning of half those long words. And what's more, I don't believe you do either." So they're in a meeting right now. So they're trying to figure out like who's gonna be the leader. I think the eaglet bent down its head to hide a smile. Some of the other birds tittered audibly. "What I was going to say," said the dodo in an off offended tone, "was that the best thing to get us dry would be a Caucasus race." "What is a Caucasus race?" said Alice. Not that she much wanted to know, but the dodo had paused as if it thought that somebody ought to speak, and no one else seemed to incline to say anything. "Why," said the dodo, "the best way to explain is to do it. As you might like to try the thing yourself. Some winter day, I will tell you how the dodo managed it. First, it marked out a race course in a short sort of circle. That exact shape doesn't matter, it said. And then all the party, while placed along the course here and there was no 1, 2, 3 and away, but they began running when they liked and left off when they liked, so that it was not easy to know when the race was over. However, when they had been running half an hour or so and were quite dry again, the dodo suddenly called out, "The race is over!" They all crowded round it, patting and asking, "But who has won?" This question the dodo could not answer without a great deal of thought, and it stood for a long time with one finger pressed upon its forehead. The position in which you usually see Shakespeare in the pictures of him, while the rest waited in silence. At last, the dodo said, "Everybody has won, and all must have prize. But who is to give the prize?" Quite a chorus of voices asked. "Why, she, of course," said the dodo, pointing to Alice with one finger. So I wanted to show you the picture of the dodo. And then there's Alice. And then you can see the dodo pointing his finger to Alice. But who is to give the prizes? Quite a chorus of voices asked. Why, she, of course, said the dodo, pointing to Alice with one finger, and the whole party at once crowded around her, calling out in a confused way, "Prizes, prizes!" Alice had no idea what to do, and in despair, she put her hand in her pocket and pulled out a box of comfits. Luckily, the salt water had not got to it, and handed them round as prizes. There was exactly one, a piece, all around. But she must have a prize herself, you know, said the mouse. Of course, said the dodo. The dodo replied very gravely. What else have you got in your pocket? It went on, turning to Alice. Only a thimble, said Alice sadly. Hand it over, said the dodo. Then they all crowded round her once more while the dodo solemnly presented the thimble, saying, "We beg your acceptance of this elegant thimble." And when it has finished this sort of speech, they all cheered. So if you don't know what a thimble is when you put like something on your thumb. So like if you're sewing, you might want a thimble on so that you don't like hurt your thumb. But it's like it's a thimble. It just goes on your thumb, like on your thumb. So Alice thought the whole thing very absurd, but they all looked so grave that she did not dare to laugh. And as she could not think of anything to say, she simply bowed and took the thimble, looking as solemn as she could. The next thing was to eat the comfits. She caused some noise and confusion, as the birds complained that they could not taste theirs, and the small ones choked and had to be patted on the back. However, it was over at last, and they sat down again in the ring and begged the mouse to tell them something more. "You promised to tell me your history, you know," said Alice, "and why it is you hate C and D," she added in a whisper, half afraid that it would be offended again. Mine is a long and sad tale, said the mouse, turning to Alice and sighing. It is a long tale, certainly, said Alice, looking down with wonder at the mouse's tail. But why do you call it sad? And she kept on puzzling about it while the mouse was speaking, so that her idea of the tale was something like this. Furry said to a mouse that he met in the house. Let us both go to law. I will prosecute you. Come, I will take no denial. We must have the trial. For really this morning I've nothing to do, said the mouse to the cur. Such a trial, dear sir, with no jury or judge, would be wasting our breath. I'll be judge, I'll be jury, said the cunning old fury. I'll try the whole cause and condemn you to death. So this is the tale. That's what the mouse said. So it sounded like he said that he was going to judge himself and that he was going to condemn himself to death. So you are not attending, said the mouse to Alice severely. What are you thinking of? I beg your pardon, said Alice very humbly. You had got to the fifth bend, I think. I had not, cried the mouse sharply and very angrily. A knot, said Alice, always ready to make herself useful and looking anxiously about her. Oh, do let me help to undo it. I shall do nothing of the sort, said the mouse, getting up and walking away. You insult me by talking such nonsense. I didn't mean it. Pardon, poor Alice, but you are so easily offended, you know. The mouse only growled in reply. Please come back and finish your story. Alice called for it, and the others all joined in chorus. Yes, please do. But the mouse only shook its head impatiently and walked a little quicker. What a pity it wouldn't stay, sighed the Lory, as soon as it was quite out of sight, and the old crab took the opportunity of saying to her daughter, Ah, my dear, let this be a lesson to you, never to lose your temper. Hold your tongue, Ma, said the young crab, a little snappishly. You are enough to try the patience of an oyster. I wish I had our Dinah here. So that's Alice's cat. Dinah here. I know I do, said Alice aloud, addressing nobody in particular. She'd soon fetch it back. And who's Dinah, if I might venture to ask the question, said the Lory. Alice replied eagerly, for she was always ready to talk about her pet. Dinah's our cat, and she's such a capital one for catching mice. You can't think. And oh, I wish I could see her after the birds. Why, she'll eat a little bird as soon as look at it. This speech caused a remarkable sensation among the party. Some of the birds hurried off at once. One old magpie began warping itself up very cheerfully, remarking, I must be getting home. The night air doesn't suit my throat. And the canary called out in a trembling voice to its children, Come away, my dears. It's high time you were all in bed. Our various pretexts, they all moved off, and Alice was soon left alone. So I don't think any of them like cats too much. So look at the picture here. There's like ducks And like they're all basically like birds. So I showed this picture before, but if you look in the background, you'll see like ducks and birds. So I know there's supposed to be a crab. I don't see the crab, but I think the crab got offended. The mouse got offended. Like everyone's leaving. I wish I hadn't mentioned Dana, she said to herself in a melancholy tone. Nobody seems to like her down here, and I'm sure she's the best cat in the world. Oh, my dear Dana, I wonder if I shall ever see you anymore. And here, poor little Alice began to cry, for she felt very lonely and low-spirited. In a little while, however, she again heard a little pattering of footsteps in the distance, and she looked up eagerly, half hoping that the mouse had changed his mind and was coming back to finish his story. So who do you think is coming? The rabbit coming back. But we shall see. So then the next chapter here is The Rabbit Sends a Little Bill. So that's the title of the next chapter. So I'm definitely thinking that it's going to be the rabbit. Let's see. So I have to head off to work really soon, but I think I might try to do a little bit of reading so we can find out who it was. It was the rabbit, trotting slowly back again and looking anxiously about as it went, as if it had lost something, and she heard it muttering to itself, the Duchess, oh, my dear paws, oh, my fur and whiskers, she'll get me executed, and I'm sure the ferrets are ferrets. Where can I have dropped them, I wondered. Alice guessed in a moment that it was looking for the fan and a pair of white kid gloves, and she very good naturedly began hunting about for them. But they were nowhere to be seen. Everything seemed to have changed since her swimming in the pool, and a great hall with a glass table and the little door had vanished completely. Very soon, the rabbit noticed Alice as she was hunting about and called out to her in an angry tone, Why, Mary Ann, what are you doing out here? Run home this moment and fetch me a pair of gloves and fan, quick now. And Alice was much frightened that she ran off at once in the direction it pointed to without trying to explain the mistake that it had made. So you guys notice the rabbit just called Alice Mary Ann. So I wonder who Mary Ann is. So he took me for his housemaid. She said to herself as she ran, how surprised he'll be when he finds out who I am. But I'd better take him his fan and gloves, that is, if I can find them. So I'm going to stop right there. I think that's a good place to stop. So we know Mary Ann is going to be the rabbit's housemaid. So let's just keep that in mind. And the rabbit is looking for a fan and a pair of white gloves. So, and it's very, very important. He is very upset about it. But that's it. So thank you so much for listening.